All right. And we'll go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, Hendrik has been co-hosting this web series, but he also has been doing quite a bit of thinking and talking to us about ways in which we can kind of establish QE hubs around the world. And it's also something that's, I think, central to a lot of the work that Gol is doing, not only in terms of building her own lab and setup, but also helping the community focus on these issues. So I will go ahead and turn things over to Hendrik and Gol to get started with our discussion. And I hope will be a lively one and will be very engaging as we go forward. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to Hendrik and to Gol.
Thanks, Brandon. Gol and I said that I go first because I made some efforts to do some slides and give an institutional perspective on the topic of QE hubs. And I think there we hit already into an interesting topic. So because what we saw in preparation of this webinar, that Gol takes it more, well, correct me if I'm wrong, Gol, scholarship-driven, researcher-driven hub approach. And I will look at the whole topic of QE hubs from an institutional perspective, how we could establish that and give some examples, how we did it with other technologies and methods. And I'm really happy to serve your breakfast. So have the coffee, take your food, and I do the entertainment part for the moment now. And I will pass over to Gol there after to basically comment on what I said and how she had successful approaches in this and what we can do to get more QE hubs. Yeah, so I start with the Trusted Learning Analytics Collective, as we call ourselves. So, in Europe, transparency of algorithms and so on is really important since many years. So that's also still something that we carry in our project theme at the moment. And especially epistemic network analysis is a very promising part because it's very transparent. You have all the codes, you can retrieve this information. So it's a highly potential tool for our program. And I will never forget how first time I saw the keynote from David. I'm not sure where it was, Australia is my feeling, but I'm not totally sure, when he presented epistemic network analysis QEA to the learning analytics community, what is more my home. I said, well, this is fantastic, cool work, this is really nice, we need to go with that. And yeah, and then let me switch some of the slides here. Oh, here. So I will shortly talk about what is Trusted Learning Analytics Collective. So who we are, how many we are, to get an impression how a hub could look like. Then first ENA steps that we choose, and that brought me into the moderating of this webinar series, and then some requirements for a QE hub from an institutional perspective that I put down for myself. So as I said, I'm based in Frankfurt, in Germany, but also at the Open University in the Netherlands, where I have been a lot of time. So put me as European or Germany, Netherlands located researcher. And what is very important about the position I have currently, it's connected to a DIPF Leibniz Institute, so a research institute, but also to a service center on innovation and digital learning within the Goethe University, and this gives us a clear service task as well. And we try to have a value proposition change to bring research into practice, basically. And this is where the QE hub idea, I will try to address them. So just to show you a few people, and maybe some of you knows that who is behind EduTech, a lot of PhDs, researchers and scholars from the field. And they are all aware of ENA and QA methods. Some others that we follow. So you hit them into a collective, like you do with many of these research groups, that many people can potentially know about the tool, but still haven't applied it for certain purposes. And we want to mature this to get more uptake here. And there we come to what we apply currently for different technologies is the SMS process. Not sure if this is in English a very appropriated acronym, but it's about scouting maturing services, right? So we scout new technology, we scout new methods, we test these methods in projects, research projects, and then If they are valuable in that sense, we mature them for the university. So we see if they are valuable for the university, if we get more uptake within the university, if we get a momentum within the university. And if this is the case and more scholars within the university setup want to have a certain approach or technology, we provide it as a service and also look for quantifying it in a way that we have enough budget to run the service. And yeah, we have this SMS process and have different, I show some of the technologies we have been doing there. I mean, very easy and currently hot topic are chatbots. So in chatbots, you have different commercial, but also non-commercial or open access platforms that we apply. And that's a typical topic we had in a project. We adapted it now to the Student Service Centrum within the university. They use it. We extended further to more faculties and so on. So it's a typical service that we do as research, mature it, and roll it then out from a technical perspective. Another topic is certification services. As we also do a lot of assessment work, we have been approached in the times of the so many refugees came to Europe and have had no documents to express their qualification, that we build up a very in research terms, not fantastic system, but it's a working prototype to basically somebody could come and say, I have been working as, I don't know, woodworker or whatever, and then you do run through a test, and then you get, and if this test makes a measurement, and then you get a certificate of a German institution that you have certain skills in this area to bring you to the job market. And this has been a major project, very important project that's still used and also transferred now to Belgium, German-speaking areas, Spain, and many other areas where we have a lot of refugees to do these basic qualifications to bring then the refugees into society, into the job market. And that's another one that we use from our experience with assessments. Then another one is, well, from the learning analytics community, Alvarado has invented this on-task software where you basically have certain data sets that are used. You have some data operation systems, and then you have a if this, then that system, right? So you cluster the students into certain clusters, A, B, C, D, and then they receive certain feedback text. And that is a good example, again, for an open source software that it has been developed in a community, that we adapted in projects, and that we more and more apply now within the university for different faculties to provide feedback. And it especially got an interest now in the Corona time, because we were able to give online learning lessons, but providing feedback to all these students was really a bottleneck. And this is where OnTask is very valuable. And another example how we could bring things and give it a home in Frankfurt in Europe for the work. And then finally, one thing that maybe is closer to also to ENA studies is something that we got funded now from the government in Germany. So they give us systematic literature reviews. Every PhD knows the systematic literature review, you use the PRISM method and so on, but they are now funds, and as research is growing so much that we have dedicated projects that we as institute have the task to run systematic literature reviews and provide then policy papers in that sense. And that's something where I see here might be also something related to ENA or other QA tools to, if they would be aware of the potential of these tools, that it would be a funding schema to getting more of these studies, ENA studies, instead of structured literature review, to provide insights into certain phenomena and state-of-the-art research. So just for outcomes that we have been doing there, and then the question is, yeah, well, what did we as ENA studies, and we get two types of projects so far when we say we support you in ENA studies. So one thing is the typical request, we do have a nice data set, I need support in analyzing the data, can you help us? And then sure, 1,000 methods could be applied, but we had one paper that we published with an ENA study that we applied on eye tracking data. It was actually the first study we did, what helped them to provide meaningful insights into this data. I don't go into this data in this paper now too much. It was our first kind of service-oriented approach where we could support them. And we still run it pretty much in a, well, there's a scholar, a postdoc, or a PhD, and they work in a project, and then we get a paper out of it. But it's not really a service so far. And we have a different approach, another approach now, like we want to research and document knowledge creation in projects XYZ, especially collaborative settings, where we say, yeah, you can do this quantitatively with doing interviews and so on, but you could also then apply on top ENA. And yeah, there we have a game with different roles and different people that use that. What is difficult to describe the effect of this game, and ENA might be a way out of this to describe the knowledge creation and the knowledge transition within the different mechanisms that are played here. And yeah, oh, I missed now the slide where we have the first visualizations of these group interactions. And now from these institutional and early steps in ENA that we have been taking, the requirements. And so when I think this from our SMS process and maturing a service, then so our account mode is pretty much we bring ENA into a project and run an investigation and publish about it. But then the topic still sits with us and people become aware of ENA or QE tools, other QE tools. And it's always a PhD who works in ENA on various topics. But a target mode that we would like to achieve is like some of the other outcomes that we have, that we can bring it into a service, like we do also with the systematic literature reviews, that the method is well known at the hub. That's something we need to achieve. And I think workshops, community building is important for that. Then we need to have dedicated personnel and teams as contact points, and also as community members to the ENA community, to the QE community, and establishing that. So not having PhDs that do one study and then they go on. So we need to have more dedicated personnel and teams here. And then the question is, do we have a pricing model around this? Do we want to have a pricing model, or we're just satisfied with being part of a study and investigating it? I think if we want to establish it as one of the services that we offer, we need to have a pricing model at the end for this. And it's very hard to estimate how this can be done for the moment. So it's really, yeah, we're looking for options there. And it's also a question how David and his team is looking to this, if there's a reselling of the method and so on. So it's just something I put here, but we don't have really answers to that. Yeah, then finally, some challenges and potentials for these hubs. I think if there would be more QE hubs in a way, you could have a network of for sharing research foci and topics that could be investigated, and maybe there are different funding bodies that could be addressed with this. That might be a potential that is there. A challenge I see is a bit of the long-winding adoption of the tools. When I remember David visited us, I think in 2019. I'm not sure, and then it took a year for us to run this first project with that eye tracking data, and getting the paper out took another half year, so 1.5 years further. And this is quite long winding if you really want to establish that for a service that yeah, people also get the momentum and so on. So a question that I see a bit of a challenge here, and also then what is the fireplace for these QE hubs? So what would make it, if you see it as an institutional point, as a service provider for a university, what would be a fireplace that these people come together, exchange information, and yeah, somehow contribute to a higher good? Yeah, I think that was my last slide, and I leave these notes for the moment. Maybe you can extend them or discuss them in a minute, but I'm really looking forward how Goal will gonna comment on those.
Thank you, Hendrik. This is great. Brendan, does it make sense for me to jump in, and then we'll do open it up for discussion? Okay, great. So yeah, as Hendrik mentioned, so I don't have any slides to share, so you'll just have to look at me and listen to me talk. But mine is more of a personal story anyway. So I decided to just chat with you all about my experience and a more kind of, I guess, bottom-up grassroots movement for creating QE hubs, if you want to call it that. I guess, you know, if we're comparing to kind of Hendrik's approach. And I can talk a little bit about institutional movements too, but I'm going to talk more today about, like I said, more of like a grassroots movement. So there's 4 ways that I'm going to talk about how I've been kind of creating a QE hub, if you want to say, at Clemson, or at least bringing people into the QE community. So I think most of you know me, but I'm Golnaz Irgens. I'm assistant professor of learning sciences at Clemson University in South Carolina in the United States. And I have a research lab called the IDEA Lab, Inclusive Digital Education and Analytics. And so, as I said, I'm going to mention kind of 4 ways. The first way is my research lab. So as a starting professor at Clemson, I'm now in my 3rd year. You know, I've had this vision for starting this research lab. And, you know, we're not a QE only research lab. That's not the only kind of research we do, but QE is our core methodology that we use. But we actually have 2 research strands. So one is designing inclusive digital learning environments that focus on engineering, computer science, and some other STEM areas. And then the second is QE. So one thing, you know, I want to kind of share with you is that I think you can still spread, right, QE research without having that be your core research strand. So you can have those 2. And one other thing is QE can be your core methodology, but I find what happens is when you start using QE, you start to find things maybe wrong with it or things you want to change, right? Or you start, as a researcher, a naturally curious researcher, you start to develop your own questions about QE. And so I think what happens is, at least what happened in our lab, is naturally we started doing QE research to try to meet our needs. So on one hand, we're doing, you know, learning sciences research, and on the other hand, this sort of QE research line has been developing. So in our lab, Hazel, who's here right now, has been leading the efforts on participatory QE, and that emerged from her research with teacher identity that she's exploring and wanting to include them in the research process when using ENA. And so now we have this kind of natural research strand in QE. And I share that in case, you know, it can seem overwhelming to have, you know, QE research going on as part of your research program. But, you know, I wanted to share that you can do both, right? You can have your one research line and then have kind of QE research emerge from that to contribute to the QE scholarship that we have. The second thing, which I know isn't attainable for everyone, but I started a QE course at Clemson, a graduate level course. So, you know, it doesn't have to be a course, but it can be a workshop. So I know some of you have done workshops, which is a little bit more attainable. I've done that too at other institutions. At Northwestern University, I set up a workshop series. But now at Clemson, I had the ability and the resources to create a whole QE class. That is a great way to get people involved in the QE community, and not just people, but graduate students who I've discovered are really key to growing this community. I talked to Brendan, and over half of you know, our participants in the conference are graduate students. And maybe that's partially my fault, because as part of our course that I developed, I offered students an opportunity to write a paper, a poster paper for the conference, and I helped them develop that and submit it to the conference. So you might see a lot of posters if you go to the conference from Clemson University students. Yeah, they did an excellent job. And that's kind of related to something else I wanted to talk about, which growing the QE community, there has to be kind of something in it for that person. So not just learning about QE or, you know, bringing them, exposing people to a new method, but for them to see routes of success, such as publications. And that is especially important for students to be able to see, okay, I see the value in this method, but I also see the value for my professional development, right? So setting those things up either institutionally or locally to see scholarship opportunities in QE, right? Being able to see where this is actually going to go and that there are opportunities for publication that are attainable. So I want to go back to talking about graduate students, and then I have just a few more minutes and I'll wrap it up. But for graduate students, again, I think they're really key. I enjoy working with faculty members. I've had lots of success with QE and ENA with faculty members and all kinds of researchers from different institutions. But I want to focus on graduate students. I think that one benefit is that the ones that I've worked with have just been so wonderful, so enthusiastic. They have the time, they have the interest. They're not committed to a method quite yet. And so it's great to kind of cultivate that interest in them and to expose them to, the power and the strength of QE compared to other methods. And the other thing is that once they graduate, right, they can ideally take that QE knowledge and spread it at a different institution. And so that is kind of one strategy that I've thought about in terms of exposing the QE community and growing the QE community. And the last thing I want to talk about is an institutional level, but a little bit local. We have a quantitative clinic at Clemson in my department in the College of Education. And I'm a member of that. And that's one way that I've been able to expose Clemson to QE beyond just in my research lab and in my class. So it's become kind of an option, right, for people to come when they need help with their data. It is a quantitative clinic, so it's kind of interesting because I think the heart of QE is qualitative, but it does, again, expose more quantitative inclined people to QE. And I think that, so these are kind of some approaches that I've taken. But beyond that, I've also thought about how to get people interested in this beyond just exposure. And I think, again, publication opportunities and allowing people to kind of see how, not that just that this work is interesting, but that there's a whole community and there's a whole research area in QE, right? We're working on developing tools. We're working on creating different interest groups, right? There's the healthcare interest group, there's different fields. But in addition, there's just people who are interested in improving the tools and branching off the method a little bit, or even thinking about the method itself and how it can be maybe defined better, or being able to conceptualize it in different ways. And then I think it's QE kind of, for me, at least in my experience, has been framed, and ENA as well, has been framed as kind of a solution to a lot of people's problems. Hendrik kind of touched on this, but we have this great data set and we want to do this, but we don't know how to do it. Or they have this idea of wanting to, be able to just push a little bit further in terms of meaning. And I found myself in a lot of situations where I'm able to say, well, let me introduce you to this idea or this concept or this tool. And I guess that's a little, again, more local. Those have just been kind of one-on-one conversations, or after I give a talk or after my students give a talk, right? Being able to frame it in that way. But framing it in that way, I think, is important, because then it kind of piques people's interest and you bring them in to have more conversations. So those are a few ways that we're exploring QE at Clemson and trying to spread the word, I guess, and build the community. I think I have my two graduate students here, Hazel and Joba, have joined, so they are part of that growing community. They're very important to it. And so, that's what we're trying to do at Clemson here. And I hope that after my graduate students graduate and leave, they're able to kind of spread that. And I know after a group of students have taken the course, they have even talked about organizing themselves into a student QE community at Clemson. And who knows, maybe then that can spread from the graduate student level, either nationally or internationally, having some sort of graduate student QE community. All right, thank you, everyone.
Great. Hendrik, go ahead. Or are you gonna?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Golnaz, I think this teaching is indeed, I missed that out. So we have a method course, Method for Educational Technology Science, where we also put ENA as one of the topics. I was wondering what discipline your students from, because mine are computer science students, and then I don't know, it was not so easy to get them interested in ENA. Maybe it's too less programming for them. So maybe but I really like the idea, and I think it's indeed something where you can grow a lot of uptake and interest from people.
Yeah, absolutely. Beyond just graduate students taking the course, it just kind of gets the word out that there is a course, a quantitative ethnography course that exists at Clemson and at University of Wisconsin, and that it's becoming, part of this methodological field, right? It's actually on the books now. The type of students that have taken my course, I've only taught it once. And unfortunately, I'm not teaching it again until next year. But I've had a lot of learning sciences students, obviously, because that's my area. I've had HCI students, human computer interaction. I've had ed policy students, so those who are interested in policy, they work with large data sets. And I think that's about it. So those were kind of the three that I've had in my class so far. I'm hoping, again, it was the first course offering, so I'm hoping to publicize it a little more and see what I get. I mean, maybe David can speak to it a little bit too. He's been teaching the course at Wisconsin for a few years.
That's actually a pretty good description of the distribution of the students I get as well. Some folks in healthcare policy. I would add to those, or healthcare, but healthcare engineering, I guess I would call it. Yeah, but a lot of it actually has to do in that case with, it's still sort of local. There are pockets of people on campus where an advisor or a student has brought a QE to a previous advisor, and that they recommend it as a method and as a course to the next, their next generation of students. So there still is a very word of mouthy approach that comes out of that.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping this is where I'm starting, at least at Clemson, and then kind of seeing where it goes. So seeing if like the graduate students organize themselves and where that leads to and how big that gets. Seeing how word of mouth kind of spreads, and if there's other faculty members who want to organize and create some sort of, sub-program as part of a program that Hendrik was kind of alluding to, or its own program itself. Something else I want to talk about with the class that Hendrik brought up is, so it's not an ENA class, it's a QE class. So, in one case you can talk about ENA, that's a part of the class, but I think what makes the class interesting and not scary, right? I think maybe you were saying, Hendrik, that ENA can be a little bit daunting for new people, is that there's a lot more there. So students can see, they pick up on something that speaks to them, right? Whether it's the qualitative part of it, the organizing the data, the ENA sometimes, the coding, the encoder, or just coding and validation for that. So there's some piece of it, I think, that they see and they kind of focus on that. That's their strength, or that's their interest. And they go through the whole QE process, but there's something I think that speaks to them that they think is interesting. So there's a lot to QE, I think, besides ENA that we can explore. That I think students see. And I mean, we can talk to my students too if they want to chime in, Hazel and Joe, but it's up to you. But if you have something to say, if not, that's completely fine.
Yeah, I mean, it is something we discussed also prior in one of the webinars. I think QE tools was it, where we also had this fantastic tool called ROC, right? ROC. So there are more tools indeed. But somehow, well, there's still a dominance of the ENA, of the epistemic network analysis suite case, you could say, so that you end up quickly in. And then, yeah, for instance, for my computer science students, it's really, they are more into the coding and having machine learning approaches for the coding. But yeah, to be honest, then those trials they have within the seminar are not good enough to also move the software forward. So it's more that they make experiences and build up the first knowledge there. But I perfectly see that the faculties that you described, or the people that's of high interest, and maybe that's also something for establishing QE hubs, that there's something like a course, a shared and open course. David, I don't know if the course is open or the content is open, and that's something that is carried among the QE hubs to stimulate these grassroots development.
I'm working on trying to produce something that's a more coherent open course But in the meantime, Goal and I have shared our syllabi back and forth, and I'm certainly happy to share a syllabus with folks who are interested. One thing I've, just as long as we're on the topic of the courses, one thing I've noticed is there are folks out there, I don't know how many, but I know there's at least one at UW, but who've actually been basically teaching QE as their introductory methods class. So they're essentially saying, yeah, there's the CNA stuff at the end, but here's a way of thinking about data that is a better way to start than just with statistics or just with some kind of qualitative methods. I mean, which I think is interesting and cool. I don't know actually how that fits in with the rest of the QE community, but it seems like there's something there to think about.
Yeah, I think one thing I've been thinking about is what are sort of the core pieces of QE. So this is a thought experiment of mine that I'm taking my time with, because I'm not teaching it till next year again. But I'd like to know what I should focus on, because there's so much for even a one semester course. And so I kind of want to narrow it down to what are sort of the key tenets of QE and how does that translate, right, to a course environment from start to finish. And as David said, it's a new way of thinking. So really what I tell my students is, by the end of this class, my expectation is not for you to, one, be an expert in QE, or two, to even use QE. I hope you do, but that's not the main goal. Is to change their way of thinking so that they are a little bit more open-minded and are now thinking more critically, right, about how the difference between qualitative and quantitative, whether that's a thing or not, and how to be able to just look at data more differently in terms of trying to create deep meaning and using the tools, tools that are available to them to create that deep meaning in a valid way.
I'd like to open things up also to other folks if they want to contribute. I know Mamta just joined us again, and I know she's doing a lot of work at Elsevier to get a certain kind of critical mass. And I see Amanda, who's been working at Drexel for a long time, and there have been people that have been engaged in groups for a long time. But I think one of the key pieces here is that a lot of times it takes a team of folks to kind of establish something. So there's all these other critical infrastructure pieces of, like, how do you get training in this? How do you get interest? Where do people see the benefit for themselves or their careers to get engaged with these things? And I think Sylvie's on here too. There's been discussions about, do we even do things to set up sort of international labs or kind of asynchronous groups or collections of people that go across places versus the kind of localized spots that then could connect and establish networks amongst themselves. But there's a lot of different efforts going on. I was hoping Janine Arantes would be able to join us. She's leading some efforts down in Australia because there's starting to see an emergent critical mass of folks down there. And people are working, I think, hard to kind of figure out how to, align different resources and get different players involved to make these things go. So I'd like to open things up to either comments or questions if other folks have either experience or things that they're considering in other locations, or, I think we have two really good perspectives that are share and sets of experiences that give some framing. But does anybody else have questions or things that they would like to share to the discussion? Amanda.
Thanks for that intro. Yeah. So I guess I wanted to share first because I think it relates really closely to what we were just talking about in terms of courses. So I've been tapped to design a quantitative ethnography and ENA course for UPenn and Drexel here at Philly. And so I guess my question, thank you. My question is, how much, I'm noticing differences in what each school is looking for in terms of the content and the design of the course. And I'm curious how aligned do we think courses at these different hubs that we're building should be? Should they be focusing on the needs of the context, or should we be aiming for some similarities, some parallels between the different courses?
I mean, I'm looking forward to that discussion with you and anyone else who has this course, right?
Yeah,
So
I was kind
mean,
of hoping we could talk more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of speaks a little bit to what David was saying in that sharing these resources, right? So I would love to share my resources with you and others who, not even even if you're not interested in developing a course, but are just curious about or want to, learn yourself. I would love to share my resources either on the the QE Society website. We can talk to Brendan about potentially doing that soon.
I loved what you were saying about building the foundations of understanding quantitative ethnography and how we think as quantitative ethnographers before we move into some of the nitty-gritty of the practice. And I think I'm seeing more and less receptivity to that at different institutions. So it's going to be interesting to see how the different courses shake out.
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting to hear the differences between Penn and Drexel and like what the needs are. Speaking of resources too, we haven't made an announcement, but we'll give a sneak preview for those of you who came today. Camilla Misijuk has taken the lead on developing a resource committee for the society. And I think if you went to the website right now, you'd see, even though we haven't announced, that there are a bunch of resources that are up right now. But there's, I think, as people have been mentioning, the need is fairly great, and kind of customizing or curating those specific things to figure out what you need when is, I think, not a trivial task just yet. And some of the work that I think will help. But the more that we have people having these discussions and sharing materials with each other, I think the better. So that's been a nice emergence. Camilla basically contacted me. She said, we've had 2 of these conferences now, and if we don't have these resources that we've talked about after each one, that will be a failure. So she kind of took the lead and made it happen, which I was happy to see. So there's a bunch of videos and other materials. She's making some book downs and other things, but that's something to definitely look out for.
Share a little bit about my experience in industry. I think I have to absolutely thank David and Brendan and Amanda, both Amandas, Amanda Siebert, Evenstone, and Barini. I think one approach that I've sort of taken on is, start very small. And it started off with an idea that I had back when I participated in the first conference's early career workshop, where, I sort of reached out to David and Simon for just brainstorming on an idea that I had, and just creating this initial seed of confidence within my company that, hey, look, we can bring a methodology like QE, and this is what it can allow us to sort of, examine. And then slowly and gradually it sort of built upon, each, creating a trail that people can follow, and been actively collaborating with Amanda Siebert, Evenstone, and Brendan on a couple of analyses and papers. And this has I'd say each paper has led to increased confidence in our partnership and in what QE brings. And this has led to, opening up more opportunities for me to seek funding for the collaborations, and, open new directions for new research. So, I'll keep it short, but I think one angle that I'd like to just throw out there is just industry and academia partnerships as one possibility to creating QE hubs. So I don't have all of the manpower, but I do have Caroline Kearns, who's one of my colleagues at Elsevier, and I know in the last few months, she's been actively taking a lot of interest in the society, and Michael Phillips is also on her dissertation committee, and I know he's been sort of expanding her understanding of QE as well. So, my hope is that at least beginning with the academia and industry partnerships, and using that as sort of a foundation to hopefully build sort of a hub that truly bridges the best of both worlds.
Just to give Mamta some credit, I think one of the things that's been very impressive with the work that she's leading is that she often is able to get a win in a short term and demonstrate the efficacy of something quickly. And so I think this relates to what Hendrik was talking about before, is that in order to really totally adopt all of QE, that can be quite a bit. But if you can find some manageable piece that can demonstrate the value, or like this is related to what Goal was talking about in terms of like showing people you can get publications from these things and how this is an effective model. That's often, I think, a useful strategy as you start to build out, is like get an early small win first that's manageable. Even though you know that there could be a lot of other things to focus on and get excited about, having those kind of intermediate wins is a really good way. And I've been impressed with how Mamta has kind of managed that, at least in my exposure with working with her. I've seen Karin Fry do a similar thing. Is she would sit on results that she had, but would know about kind of a strategic kind of set of moves that she could make in terms of rolling stuff out and bringing QE into a new field. And I think Hendrik had his hand up, and then David, you were next.
Yeah, I just want to bring back. So what established a QE hub? So I think when you put it like this, I really like the idea of the public-private partnership, but in principle, we could just continue like we do, right? We all apply ENA or QE tools. We might have a course, and we are basically individuals and scholars that see this method, the potential of the method, and apply it, and it will grow in a way. But why then the term hub, right? Because then it could also be a method that is meaningful to us. So what establishes a hub? And there also, I like these success stories. So to bring out the message, that's really important that more people get aware of this wonderful method, to ask for it and get the help there. So I just want to bring this idea in, and maybe David has something to share what he sees in the term of a hub.
I was going to ask about something similar. So one of the things that in the society we've been talking about is this question of graduate students versus more senior people in the society. And I agree with Goal, graduate students of the future, no doubt. But I do think that in the intermediate term, right, and eventually they will be senior people in the field, right? So that problem solves itself over time. But in the short run, right, I see there's sort of a logistical roadblock, basically, where if there aren't enough senior people, then there aren't enough people who are mentoring graduate students. There aren't enough people that graduate students can enlist to convince their advisors or be on their committee, right? So there's a sort of bottleneck there. And so one of the things we've been talking about is at the doctoral consortium, when students get accepted to the doctoral consortium, their advisors also get basically a free ticket to the conference. And there's an actual set of events, small set of events for them, so that they're introduced to what it is that their graduate students are doing, not with the expectation that they'll necessarily do it themselves, but at least then that graduate student has somebody else at their university who sort of knows what's going on. We haven't done it yet. I'm not sure whether it'll work, but I am interested in thinking about whether there are things, now we have a society, right? Are there things that the society could do structurally that would set up the conditions for success for the people to be able to grow local concentrations of expertise? We'll call them that instead of hubs, Hendrik, because then we don't have the problem of what a hub means. But I mean, I've thought of the hub as being not just that there's an internal concentration of expertise, but also that that becomes a place that people outside of the hub itself can go, and get help and get support and get motivation and any number of other things, right? So UW has kind of functioned that way for a little while. I don't think in the long run QE flourishes very well if there's just one hub, right? So we need multiple hubs. But I don't know if that's, do we need more smaller conference opportunities like Hendrik in the learning analytics, right? There was the learning analytics summer institutes, which were much more local conferences where people went and they could share work, but also share the latest tools and so on. So that's sort of one possibility. I guess I'm just wondering, like, what, I know that we want videos and manuals and things, but it seems to me that there's some other structural questions that we could think about that would help people get access to what they need to set up and grow and flourish locally, and then make broader connections. And I don't exactly know what those are, but that seems to me it's like if we had more about that, or more of those, we might be able to move things along faster than just waiting for the graduate students to finally finish their dissertations and then start their own labs.
I mean, one thing I wonder about is we have this webinar, which is a great place for people to come together. But what if there was sort of like a program, like an invitation program, where you could reach out and invite someone to come to your institution or your corporation, to either, there could be some options, just give a talk, something more informal, share resources, something like that. And that way people who are interested can reach out to, maybe that's how the hubs can, one way that hubs can get created too. Like we have a few people or places that you can turn to, and we make that a little bit more explicit, and you can invite them in some format.
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, we had this indeed with the Learning Analytics Summer Institutes that have been nationally and also connected. And I mean, this all kind of stopped with Corona, right? Then was just one LASI, and I think it's important that would be something that you can do online, but in order to get a higher commitment of people, it's good to meet this face to face. In a way, so yeah, something like this I think is important to build up the expertise, and also the motivation around it to have it as a place. Yeah, and then the teaching is one way out, because with the teaching you build these moments where people come together and apply the methods and discuss it.
Yeah, I think that the one of the things that we've kind of noticed when we've tried things over the years, one year we did a kind of a more prolonged workshop in Madison where we had people come for a week. So it's much more intensive than, say, a workshop that you'd get before a conference, which are really important too. And something we're actually starting today, a new kind of experiment, is what we're calling the QE Accelerator. We have a few of the facilitators here with us today, and which is great. But that, I think, is something that's more prolonged, because I think once people kind of get a taste for things, they will run into some challenges, right? At some point, whether it's they need to figure out something, or they need to like in a tool, or they have a methodological question, or they need to think strategically about publication or engaging with their committee or whatever it is, thinking about writing a grant. And I think some of those like more prolonged opportunities are a good way to go. But again, even then, that's just helping to develop some of the individual infrastructure and some of the players that we would need to be at these, what did David say, concentrations of expertise, right? So it's providing the expertise that then can be concentrated and coordinated together. So I'm excited about that as well. Yeah, Amanda.
I do wonder, based on Hendrik's comment, this is something I've been concerned about for some time for all the obvious reasons, but like COVID really hit this community at a difficult time. Thank heavens we had decided to go ahead and have the first conference when we did, because otherwise we'd probably be sitting around waiting and waiting and waiting to have a conference, because nobody wants to start their first conference online. And I'm really kind of astonished and proud of the community that it looks like we're going to survive through 2 virtual conferences. And if we have to have a third, then I think I'm just giving up, but on a whole lot of things. But hopefully we'll get to Copenhagen and beyond. But I do wonder how much of the kind of sense of, I sometimes sense this sort of anticipatory energy in the community. Like people are sort of ready to kind of break out and go bigger in whatever way in their own context. And yet it's hard to, because things have been kind of locked down. And that when we're able to travel again and move, I would just wonder if some of that energy will kind of come out in ways that we can't. It's either difficult to anticipate now because of where we are, or even just would be difficult to anticipate. There would just be kind of some organic growth as people are actually able to move around and come to a conference and think about holding a summer institute, or, come to Madison, or go to Clemson or whatever. Like, just the exchange of ideas might be much more vigorous if we weren't all kind of in lockdown.
Amanda, you'd unmuted for a second. Were you going to say something? Sorry, Hendrik too.
Oh, I just had this pie in the sky visualization of some sort of like interactive social network of the different hubs and who's in them, and with clickable CVs and lists of expertise, so that someone who's new to this field could kind of see the geography of our landscape. I don't know how we would make that, but I feel like maybe that would be a nice primer for people.
I like it.
Yeah, and I don't know. So indeed, COVID is annoying, but it enabled also people to attend the conference without funds. Don't underestimate also the opportunity that you can just click of your computer, you're in the community, you can see. And I had a couple of people, but this is what I wrote down was the long winding effect of this somehow. It's not something you go to the conference, the next day you do an EA study and you apply it. That takes more time, and there I think we need to be either more patient. I'm just not sure, because I mean it's a fantastic method, but it needs time that you also get outcomes now. And I personally, as what I assumed what we could be as QE Hub was also delayed due to COVID, but also need to accept that things need more time in that sense, because we have all the other things around us, and it's still there, it's still emerging, it's applied often, and also scholars mention it from their own, that they want to apply it now in this context. So it's all going to the right direction. And maybe we need to be a bit more patient with this. Just, I don't know. I feel a bit mixed about it.
No, I think that's good. That's something I always struggle with, is if we get excited or see potential, we want to go right away. But I think that's good. I liked two things David mentioned in the chat. Would it make sense for the society to have funds that an institution could apply for to get a QE expert to come to campus, give a talk or workshop? I like that idea. I'd be interested in what other folks think. I also really want to visit Clemson, because supposedly it is nice. So actually, I've been to Clemson. It is nice. And then Mamta mentioned that you're planning to actively spotlight scholarship of group individuals through communication committee activities, which is great as well. That's another committee that has come out. So yeah, I think things are emerging, and that's good. Yes, the people are nice too. That's actually a crucial piece, Hazel. I think we try to focus on that. Yeah, David.
Brandon, can I put in a small pitch for a session at ISQE that's pretty closely related to this topic, or at least connected to this topic? I know we're getting towards the end. So there's a session, I don't know exactly when it is in the schedule, but it's essentially about QE infrastructure. And it's a chance for the community to come together and think about the sort of flip side of the problem that we're talking about now, which Hendrik raised, right? As people are starting to build new tools and new methods within QE, how do all those things talk to one another in a way that doesn't require everyone to become a computer scientist, or to or to keep track of how the data flows between all these different tools. So you code it in Rock, and then you want to take something else that's coded in Encoder, and you put them together in ENA, and then you want to do some kind of statistical analysis on that, right? And so the question is, part of the appeal of the QE community is that we bring people from lots of different disciplines around to think about data in similar ways. And in that sense, ENA and some of the other tools are kind of boundary crossing objects, for those of you who know the term, right? There are ways in which two different communities can talk to one another, even if they don't speak exactly the same language. And so the question is, how do we maintain that spirit as people are developing new coding methods and new ways of thinking about ENA and new tools that do other things than ENA do within the QE universe? How do we bring all that together so that it's not just lots of pieces sitting in lots of places that everybody has to figure out how to assemble for themselves, or figure out literally like the mechanics of assembling them? It's something that would be much more usable. So if you think about sort of like, I'm thinking anyway about like if you cross Scratch with Tidyverse and QE, if you sort of had, if those had a three-headed baby, right? That this is the sort of thing that we want. In any case, there's a session at ISQE where hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about that. So if people are interested, I'd love to see you there.
That's a great segue to some announcements that I'd like to make. But before I do, I just want to thank both Hendrik and Gol for their time and ideas and expertise, and for all of you for joining the discussion. I think it's a good one, and obviously one that we'll want to keep continuing at other events. Just as a reminder, on top of that session, there's the schedule I think is finalized and is getting put up as we speak. That's being worked on. So there might be some tweaks here or there, but it's mostly there. So take a look out on the website as that's getting finalized. And also, if you haven't registered already, go ahead and do so we can make sure that we are tracking the workshop numbers and all the other events. And also let other people know. So as Hendrik said, we have a really good opportunity, right? Like not everything is bad with COVID. We're trying to get as many people that might not have been able to, jump on an international flight or schedule things like to be able to come to the conference, to be able to join. And we're going to make the schedule flexible like we did last year. So it's convenient for as many people around the world as we can make it. So let people know, tell your network. We have materials if you want, like little flyers or things that you could send out, tweets or emails to invite people to come. The registration always looks good, but let's try to get as many people as we can. Invite your friends, anybody, even if they're just tangent, like they just want to dip their toe in, have them come. Because there's no risk or downside, right? You should just come check us out. So thanks again, David.
Brendan, yeah. What's the registration fee for the conference this year? It's online.
It's free unless you have come before. Then it's highly subsidized and it's only $50. So for graduate students and postdocs, it's free. For anyone who's never been to one of our conferences before, it's free. And if you have been before and you're like a faculty member, it only costs $50, and the NSF is going to be subsidizing the rest of your, you have to agree to help provide mentorship. This is getting back to what David's talking about before, but that's kind of already a hallmark of what we do, is we try to connect old timers and more central members of the community to new people to help them get started. So that's something you can tell folks is that it's free and it's a great opportunity. So we've already seen good interest, but we'd like to blow through the records in terms of who registers. So go ahead and let folks know it's a great opportunity. Also,
the workshops sold out yet, or what's the?
We have to double check. We might
want to
expand it. We might have to do some expansion. So that's the other thing too, is you might want to sign up early or tell your friends to sign up early in case we do end up running out of capacity with our facilitators, but we might be expanding the kind of the classic, or what we've called evergreen workshops, like Intro to ENA, Rock, Encoder, those types of things. So take a look out for that. But yeah, there is a plan to expand those things and make sure that we can accommodate as many folks as possible. All right, so we're a little over time, but I'd like to thank everyone again for coming, especially to Hendrik and to Gol. And we look forward to seeing you, if not at the accelerator later today, at the conference and future events. So thanks again for a really great season of another season of these webinars is in the bag. It's great. I love that the celebration for you, Gol, goes right over the Clemson paw. It looks like it's well coordinated. No, I think it's good. So, all right, be well and have a great week, everyone. Thanks.